We're live. We're going to go live. Greetings, everyone from New York City, the city that never sleeps. And I have to tell you that coming here has a definite impact on every part of my being. Everything gets speeded up just a bit. I know that's a frightening thought for those that know me well, and I'm okay with that. But I still get to welcome you to Refresh. This is our time to connect, to be inspired, to learn something, and ultimately to feel a bit better for this time we have together. So a big exhale, a cleansing breath, as they say. And Jill, you will certainly make us feel better, and no pressure. I have to just tell you
I'm not feeling it.
I'm here because tonight I have this incredible privilege of being in the room, the sold out room, to celebrate the Women's Sports Foundation's annual salute. And this year recognizing the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And I can tell you, my teammate, Gail Marquis, another pioneering woman in sports. Gail, it's so good that you're here. I'm here with my colleagues, an incredible group of wonderful women leaders from the World Surf League. I love this sport. I love this league. I love our athletes. And I couldn't be delighted that the new CEO of the Women's Sports Foundation, an incredible leader in her own right, is an old friend, Danette Layton, who previously led the WNBA's Sacramento Monarchs, went on to do great work at the Pac-12 before coming to lead the important work of the Women's Sports Foundation. So tonight, I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to seeing Billie Jean King and Alana Kloss, both who've been at Generation W and have contributed mightily. The newest member of the Basketball Hall of Fame, Swin Cash. She was just, a fabulous athlete, but also member of the community when I ran the league. And of course, my great friend, Olympian and board member, Kate Johnson. But I have to say, mostly it's about celebrating strong women and the power of sports to be a force for good in the world. And I know Jill has experienced that as well. And speaking of strong and amazing women, a Hall of Famer in her own right, Jill, I don't know how many Hall of Fames you're in, but you're in my Hall of Fame. She is a true force for good in the world. Today we have superstar, celebrated, answer woman on all things with the dollar sign, Jill Schlesinger. Today, as I told her before all of you joined us, I'm like a fangirl today because I truly am a fangirl of Jill's. She's brilliant. And she shares it not only because she knows about all things financial, but is so well, she has this great ability to communicate with her audience in a way that, one, doesn't make us feel too dumb, but provides the opportunity for us to understand complex problems and digest them, and gives us actionable tips to make us smarter about our financial lives. So I do have a blurb about Jill. I'll give you the official blurb. That was my blurb. Covering the economy, markets, investing, and more. Jill is an Emmy Award-winning, Gracie Award-winning business analyst for CBS News, host of the Jill on Money podcast and nationally syndicated radio show, notable blogger, and author of, I love this book, The Dumb Things Smart People Do with Money. Of course, if it was me, it would be The Dumb Things Dumb People Do with Money, but that's okay. And The Great Money Reset, which will be coming out January 2023. And I'm sure after we all listen to Jill, we will be the first online to purchase this book. She's here to give some expert advice and translate some of the complexities of the money puzzle. And that's how I look at the world, the money puzzle, into understandable and relatable answers. I'm hoping all of you will have great questions for Jill. I'm going to start out with a real tough one, Jill. How'd you get here?
Okay.
How'd you get here?
Easy peasy. Oh, first of all, I'm in one Hall of Fame. I'm in the Brown University Sports Hall of Fame because my sophomore year soccer team was a top 10 ranked program. So that's 100 years ago when the Ivy League actually was excelling at women's sports and reaching the top 10. And we went to the tournament. I believe we lost in the quarterfinals to UNC, and they were much better than us. Okay, that's all of it, my history there. Okay, how did I get here? Long story short, grew up in a family where my father was a trader on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, which meant that my summer jobs, instead of doing fun things like I'm a waitress or I'm working at the ice cream shop, I was a clerk on the floor of the American Stock Exchange during my summers, and for my uncle who was on the New York Stock Exchange. So I worked summers there. I graduated from college. I was a trader on the floor of the Commodities Exchange, which as I know we have a lot of athletes, so I think people will sort of understand this, which is I basically found a career that was a sport where they ring the bell in the morning and they ring the bell in the afternoon. You tally up whether you won or you lost, and like that was it. So the commodities exchange is a crazy place. To date myself, you could see the glimpse of the floor where I traded. If you watch the movie Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd, that was filmed on the floor of the COMEX. COMEX had 800 members, and I was one of 8 women who were members of that.
I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you because that doesn't sound like a sport that was actually co-ed.
No, definitely not co-ed. And, I kind of thought that was going to be my career. I thought I was going to join my dad's firm or my uncle's firm. And as it turned out, I really didn't like it that much. So after 4 or 5 years, I was like, ugh, I don't like this. Wound my way back up to Providence, Rhode Island, where I went to college and joined a firm that gave financial planning and investment advice. And I grew that firm by hosting a radio show to get basically people to understand who we were and what we did. We grew the firm, we sold the firm, and I got really good at doing radio and TV, and had been moving back and forth between my hometown, New York, and Providence, and had done some television work nationally. Someone from CBS saw me early in the financial crisis. I started being sort of like their go-to person to translate the craziness of 2008. And then in the beginning of 2009, they said, knocked on my door. They said, hey, we'd love for you to come, work with us. And I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. Come in, have a meeting. 3 weeks later, I signed a contract. So I've been with CBS since April of 2009. And everything else kind of was an extension of that. So I do I really think of my job as a translator. I translate whatever's going on in the economy, in finance, in corporate America, in personal finance, and try to just bring it to people in a way that they can understand it and apply it to their own lives. So there it is. That's Jill on Money in a nutshell.
I love the translator part, because that's how I experience you as one of your viewers. And it's like when you're on, I'm so excited because I feel like I'm going to get an authentic answer and a real answer. I don't feel like it's, you know what I mean? You're pushing me somewhere or another. You're just trying to explain it. And in this day and age of a post-truth world, it is so helpful, Jill. Really, it is. So let me ask you this. And again, I'm going to ask everybody here as we get warmed up for their questions. But what today, obviously, there's economic headwinds, sounds like it. Although, the administration wants to keep the headwind talk out of the news. And I get that. But what's the most popular or often asked question you get today?
Well, I mean, there's sort of 3 levels of questions that I get about the economy. It's when is the inflation rate going to come down? And the answer is I don't know, and neither does the Federal Reserve. So we're going to get, as we record this tomorrow morning, 8:30 Eastern time, you will be hungover from your big gala tonight, and I will be getting ready to report on the consumer price index. And we're going to find out that, everything is just more expensive and it stinks, and we're grumpy about that because inflation is a real problem and it impacts every single person, actually all across the globe. So the first question is, when will inflation come down? I'll give you the boring answer, which is eventually, because it will not. The Federal Reserve is going to keep raising interest rates. So the other question is, will the Federal Reserve itself push us into a recession? And the reason is that, ready for your who here took Econ 101? If you slept through it, which many people do, it can be really boring. Here is a Econ 101. There is demand, there is supply. And when there's a lot of demand and limited supply, prices rise. That's inflation. And so what we experienced after the pandemic is this surge in demand, because we were all cooped up at home and bummed out, and we started spending money on goods, not services. We couldn't go anywhere, but the supplies were all messed up because of the pandemic, because we didn't have manufacturing plants open. And so prices really did take off. And so at first, like literally a year ago, the Fed's like, oh, we think this is a temporary thing. It's going to go away. The supply chain, a term that many people never heard of before a year and a half ago. The supply chain will get worked out. It'll be fine. And what the Fed found was like, actually, the supply stuff is not working itself out so fast, and inflation is here to stay. So we need to start raising the cost of borrowing. So what's the Fed's goal? We raise the cost of borrowing money, which means people will not borrow as much and therefore they won't spend as much. So they're really concentrating on the demand side of the equation. Here's what the Fed can't do. They can't wave a magic wand and say, like, your refrigerator is stuck in China and we can't get it out. So they can't help ease some of the supply chain issues. The Fed couldn't figure out how to get more microchips for your cars. But in general, these relationships should smooth out over time. And the real question is, because the Fed keeps raising interest rates, they've raised interest rates 5 times so far this year for a total of 3 percentage points. And the question is, will they raise interest rates so much that it slows the economy down so far that we actually end up in a recession or a contraction? And that's the fear. And that's what you kind of see when you see financial markets bouncing around, up one day, down one day. A lot of that fear is based on, will the Fed actually cause a recession? They may. We have no control over it. So that's kind of where we are in the economy right now. So that's the biggest question about the economy. It's inflation and interest rates. In fact, I was just putting together a little tidbit for CBS News for the radio division, and I was writing a 60-second script, which is going out for the midterm elections. They said, write a 60-second script about what's going on in the economy. And I said,
Okay.
I think the first line goes something like this. The 2022 midterm elections are sponsored by the letter I. I as inflation, I as in interest rates. Those are the two things that are moving the economy right now. The second question that I get asked most often is, I'm about to retire. Am I screwed? Is it going to mean that I can't retire? And the answer is maybe. I don't know. And each person has a different situation. I just told somebody, like my producer, Mark, who is like the godsend of my life, he's my executive producer. He says that some days I'm a dream maker and some days I'm a dream crusher. It just depends, on your situation. But I will give it to you straight, no matter how how you're feeling. I promise I will tell you where you really stand. So it's like, really, a lot of people have like a retirement question. And then I would say the next level of questions I get are from people who are starting out, who feel like, I'm just starting out. What should my priorities be? And so I think that those are kind of the big basket of questions that we get. It's about the bigger economy, retirement, and then the just starting out. And then the other people who, I take questions every single day from my audience at jillonmoney.com. The questions that we get often are just, am I on the right track? Because as you pointed out when we started, this is emotional. And, it's one of the reasons I love this subject matter, because when our friend Lisa joins, she's much smarter than I am. And she has probably a much better grip on like sort of the sophisticated part of the market. I like the crazy part that's all the emotions. And I do find that we tend to be our own worst enemy when it comes to money. And it's not really that complicated. It doesn't have to be, higher math. It really is about just figuring out where you are and what you need to do next to kind of put your best foot forward.
Well, I'm glad you raised that. And welcome, Valerie Marks. I'm so glad you're here with us. Jill wrote a book, I guess it was 2019. As you're saying, you like the understanding the psychology of money. Money is very emotional. Money is very tied culturally, how we look at money. I love the name of the book. I said it earlier, Dumb Things Smart People Do with Their Money. And I love this. This is the blurb. Reveals so many of the completely irrational things we do in the name of money. How so much conditioning from family and society leads to bad decisions and what we can do about it all. What are some of the really bad decisions that we make because of our emotional connection to money?
I'm going to give you the best example of this that I find. And it's like the one part of the book where I went on a rant. And it has to do with everyone's favorite topic, death. Because who doesn't want to talk about death? You wake up this morning and you're like, oh, I want to talk about death. But here's the one certainty. We are all going to die. And yet, I can tell you that just 1/3 of American adults have a will. 1/3.
Wow. Okay.
And a lot of those people have children. So a lot of those people have assets and have education and have needs. And I think this is shocking considering even now, after going through a pandemic where so many people got sick, so many people passed away, such unexpected horror really hit us, right? Okay, so why do I bring this up as the example? We all
Yes.
know that we need to actually do this, and yet we push it off to the side. And we push it off to the side at the peril of becoming what I like to say the most hated person in my family after I die. And what do I mean by that? Because if you die and you don't have an instruction manual for your family as to how you want your assets distributed, or you want your stuff distributed, or you want your end of life care delineated, or you want to say to your loved ones, here's how I want my service when like instructions, here's who I want to care for my children. If you don't put that down on paper, do you know who gets to decide this for you? Your
Who?
state of residence. Your state of residence. Now, I know you're a proud person who lives in Florida. I'm a proud New Yorker. However, there is no way in hell that I'm going to leave the Empire State of New York the ability to determine where my stuff goes and what happens next. So, this is one of the worst mistakes that we make, which is we fail to understand that our inaction today on estate planning, on having a will, on having a durable power of attorney, on having a healthcare proxy, without having these three basic documents in place, we are leaving a crap show for our heirs to deal with. And it's just not fair. And it's so preventable. And there are a lot of actual real financial issues that can arise from this. But that's like my best example of how we don't like to think about death. We don't want to think about who's going to take care of our kids. We don't want to think about getting sick. And I want to contemplate like what would happen next if. But if you just do it and you take care of it, you can put it back up on the shelf and not think about it.
No, you're right. And Valerie said it, but it's also complex, right? Again, many emotional issues. And it's funny because I wouldn't have done it unless my husband made me. I'm like, I'm not talking about this. And then finally he said, we have to, and you will, and it will be okay. And yet now when we try to talk about it with our kids, they're like, we're not talking about this. They don't want to contemplate the fact that we might not be there tomorrow. It's very, very emotional. And there's hard decisions you have to make too when you think about this idea of how are you going to divvy up whatever assets you have, and it doesn't matter how small they are either, right? You don't want. Yes,
Right.
I'm not leaving mine to the Sunshine State either. Totally agree.
Right. And so that's one example. I mean, I think another example is when you think about like the emotional pull of investing in general. You're a young investor, you're an old investor. It doesn't matter. Markets go up, markets go down, and when they go down, you get into this mindset of, it's never going to end. And when it's going up, you think this is never going to end. Things are great. And so there is something that is I'm kind of fascinated by, which is called behavioral economics. It's sort of call it the intersection of psychology and economics. Okay,
Mhm.
and what happens is that we are often driven to a decision today based on what happened most recently. That's called recency bias. So
Mhm.
if you think about it, like right this second, people are just freaking out about the market. Okay, the
Yep.
stock market, US markets are down by more than 20%. The bond market's down by 14 or 15%. The world's coming to an end. I want to go hide and be in cash. You feel like you want to do something. However, I would point you to exactly 1 year ago when stocks were making all-time highs. And when I would say to people like, gosh, you have a lot of risk, they're like, well, I wouldn't want to be in cash or bonds. Who would want to be in those?
Right.
You know, so what happens most recently often can uh, steer our actions today. So what I like to say to people is we're all emotional beings. That's the beauty of being a human being. You actually have to understand I have emotions. It doesn't mean I have to act on those emotions. And that's the
Okay.
challenge when it comes to your money. So you can say like I have this like scarcity mindset. I grew up broke. And
Yes.
so that's really scary to me. And so I don't allow myself to actually have any fun right now. All I do is save, 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 save. Maybe I'm first generation, maybe I grew up poor, whatever. And that's one reaction to a circumstance. The other reaction is I grew up poor. I now have a few bucks. I'm going to go crazy and spend like mad. And that's like all those stories about like someone who wins the lottery, or these all these professional athletes who blow through all their money early in their careers because they've never had money before. All we
Correct.
want people to do is to just acknowledge, like, I understand where I came from, and maybe I don't have to go to either of those extremes.
Right. Okay. Most financial planners or analysts will just say, write it out. Just write it out. This too will change.
Yep.
How do, how,
Um, Well, okay, there's two parts of this that are interesting. One is that they are right. Usually, we just kind of, if you look at statistics, 70% of the time markets rise, 30% of the time they go down. Over the long term, we see that if you're a long-term investor, that things should be okay, right? Like we had huge examples of this, right? We've went like 2008, 2009. Big example. The market craters, it comes back. Even in the pandemic, the US stock market lost a third of its value in 5 weeks and came roaring back. Okay. Today, what I think people are feeling is like things are never going to come back, and they probably will come back. However, this comes with an asterisk, not unlike, a home run record in the National League. And the asterisk is not about steroids, but the asterisk is about if you need money within the next 12 months, that is money that never should have been at risk in the first place. And I point that out because sometimes people will be, it's an error to think that I'm just going to wait for it to come back if you know you need the money. So if you had said to me a few months ago, the market's starting to go down, I know I have to write a tuition check in blank, however many, you have a kid going to college. I know I have to buy a new car. The money that you know you are going to need within the next 12 months should not be at risk. And if it was at risk, you have to bite the bullet and get out of that. So, presuming you've got a long-term horizon for investing, 10, 20, 30 years, sure, stay the course. But if you do need that money within the next 12 months, then you've got to free that up right now. And you have to say, whoops, that was a very painful lesson. My father had a great way of describing investing in general, because I remember like the first time I had a position overnight, because a trader, you can kind of get flat at the end of the day, but I went home with a position, and the market moved against me. So this is when you had to actually like call and fax a trading desk in London to undo the bad decision you made during the day. And I said to my father, I don't know what I should do. He goes, well, now you know what it feels like to be a seasoned investor. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know how you season a piece of meat? You whack it with a mallet. You bash it over, time and time again. He says, that's what it means to be a seasoned investor. You take a few whacks and you don't make that same mistake again.
I understand, but going back to your behavioral economics and the recency thing, what you're always going to remember is you got bopped on the head. You're not going to want that to happen again. It will.
That's not a bad thing, though. To me,
Okay.
that's not a bad thing. So, like, I don't think it's bad to remember that you got whacked over the head. I think what's good to remember is that you say, oh, I took 2 Tylenol and I felt fine. Not that I'll never do that again. Now, there is also the case that people think they can assume more risk than that they can tolerate more risk when everything's going their way, right?
Right.
And so then you might learn that I took too much risk. That was bad. That was really dumb of me. I can't handle risk. And so if I can't handle as much risk, and I know I'm never going to be, I don't want to live through being that uncomfortable over and over and over again, then what you say is I'm going to have to live with a lower risk kind of investing position, and I might have to save more money. I've met people who are amazing savers. For example, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, children of the Depression. Okay.
Yes.
They were born in 1923. And there's a great story about my mother-in-law. She managed all the money in that household, 5 kids, and she had one of her sons was into investing and said, I think you should, talk to this guy. He's a broker. And they had one investment in like one of these crazy limited partnerships in like the 70s or 80s. And she's like, I will never do that again.
Hmm.
So all they did was save, and they had savings bonds, they had CDs, they had municipal bonds as they made a few more bucks, and they had a teeny tiny like mutual fund of stocks, but like maybe 20%. And you know what they decided? We'd rather not be on that horrible roller coaster ride. We're kind of merry-go-round people, and we are willing to save more to make up for the fact that we might actually not be able to grow our assets as much. And that was the trade they made, and it was fine. And by the way, as she died at age 98, she actually still had money left because they were so prudent. And so there are two sides to an equation when you start thinking about your retirement planning or anything else in your life. There's money in and there's money out. You have know the amount of money coming in, and you may be able to control that by choosing what profession you go into. But the real side of the equation you can control is what you spend. And if you can curtail your spending to kind of be in line with how much money you earn, and you're still able to save, and you're willing to forego certain things that maybe some of your neighbors are doing, or some of you don't have fear of missing out, and you just save, and you're going to be okay. I always laugh because people will call and say, I made an investing mistake. An investing mistake you can get over. What you can't get over is I can't help people who don't know how to save. If you can't do that, no one is going to do that for you. No one has a magic solution. You're going to have to do that yourself.
Okay, so let's come back to that for a second. Let me just welcome everybody. We have a lot of people out on Facebook. Hello, we're here with Refresh, right? Connecting, feeling better with the amazing superstar and Hall of Famer, now that we know, Jill Schlesinger. And as you can tell, she is an unbelievable dream in helping us understand money matters. And we're also joined by Lisa. Lisa's with us now, and I know Lisa will have a question. Lisa, if you want to put your microphone on, you can say yes. If you don't, that's okay. She just said, I am here. There she is. We have a picture of Lisa. I want to come back to this whole idea of saving, but before we do that, Elizabeth May, she said, I've been listening to Ray Dalio and Simon Hunt, this 500-year cycle of the rise and fall of currencies. I just can't imagine, but I'm sure there's a pattern there. Recession to depression. Their advice is to have zero debt, savings, and proper investments in place. Are these good sources? Are they on track?
I mean, Lisa, so here's what I have to say. I mean, these are people who are not real people in general. This is what I mean by this. Like, most Americans cannot afford to have no debt. They have a mortgage, for example, right? I don't think you should have credit card debt. I think it would be great if you didn't have to have a student loan. But I presume if we talk to a lot of people and we did like a quick poll of people, no one was paying college full boat for everyone who's listening to this right now. So some people need to have debt to accomplish things in their lives. So yes, do you want to drive yourself crazy with 500-year cycles? Fine, great, go nuts. I'm not into that. Like, recessions are part of the economic cycle. We will have recessions. I hope we don't have a depression. That would be a great thing to avoid. But we have contractions over time. And the vast majority of Americans, first of all, we have a ton of people who can't afford to buy a house because they are renters. So that's number one. So is it good to have like as little consumer debt as possible? Yes. Is it freaking tone deaf to have some, can I say a bad word on this or not?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
All right. I will say it as like somebody, and Lisa is going to by the way, Lisa and I went to camp together, so we've known each other for 100 years. So, I mean, like, to have some a-hole who's a bazillionaire to say, like, you don't need any debt. Like, they're so disconnected from reality. The vast majority of people need debt because that's how they're going to buy their house, and that's how they're going to get educated. So, like, to give that advice seems so pathetic to me because you're so disconnected. So let's presume that a lot of people don't have that choice, right? They have cash flow, they make money, they have a home, which they financed with a mortgage. Hopefully it's an affordable mortgage. They're putting their kids through college. They're helping their older parents. There's only so much we can ask of people. So here in the real world, where I deal with people who actually have needs, they don't have this choice. So do you think that if there is going to be some 500-year cycle and recession and depression and all that, you want to make yourself crazy? Go for it. I don't live in that world.
Yeah, it's so interesting about living in the real world and making really hard, everyday kinds of decisions. I mean, I mean, it's so funny because we are all in my household. My husband and I are just such a contrast in styles when it comes from money. And I am, and it's interesting, right? I am a legacy of depression grandparents who fled Europe, who put money under the mattress. And you know what? It's not like I saw that, but somehow they communicated that to me, right? And so I continue to
Yes.
live that out, and I'm sure I'm not alone in that.
Absolutely. I think that where you come from shapes a lot of your money views. Now, I'm lucky. I grew up a rich kid in a fancy suburb and everything was paid for me. So like let me own that. So but the difference is that my parents never said you're entitled to that. That's like, oh, that's good fortune. You were born into the right family. And we didn't have so much money so that I don't have to work, which is a sadness that my sister and I share. Like, I wish, too bad we were this close from having real money. But, I was able to graduate from college with no debt. That is a humongous advantage. Okay.
Huge,
And,
huge.
and I was able to come out of school where, of course, I had friends. I bet Lisa has friends like this also, that we grew up in places where when we were graduating from college, there were people who lived in New York City of our age and their parents were writing checks to pay their rent. My parents were not paying my rent. Just to be clear, when I took my job, I had two like the two job offers that I was really excited about was the one job that I ended up taking, which was working for a trading firm where I was going to get access and be on the floor really quickly and be a trader. And that paid $15,000 a year in 1987. And as soon as you went from being a clerk to being a trader, they doubled your salary to 30. And you then got to be able to have a percentage of the money you made for the firm. The other job that I was offered was like a $45,000 a year job on a trading desk for a large bank where I'd sort of be stuck slogging it out. And I really wanted to take the job that started at 15. And I said to my father, I never forget this. I said, well, I don't know how I'm going to afford my rent if if I'm going to make
Right,
$15,000 a year. And you know what
right,
he said? He goes, well,
right.
you have two choices. You can live home and commute, or you can sell your car and pay your rent for 6 months and hope you get on the floor. You get on a trading position within 6 months. Those are your two choices. Never did he say your mother and I would be delighted to pay your rent for you. It was not an option. So I grew up saying there are choices. The choice you make has ramifications. So he was saying, you want more upside? You're going to take that risk? That's your risk. That's not mom and my risk. And by the way, I sold my car and it did not take 6 months for me to get on the seat. My salary doubled in 3 months, and I had a really good year trading because the market crashed and it came back. So it was a good year for me. But these are the kinds of things I think that
Yeah,
parents need to be able to have more confidence in their kids to say, you don't just write the check. You let the kids understand that they have choices. I feel this way about college education as well. I'm so lucky. My grandparents had a few bucks. They saved money for college for me and my sister. For
right.
most families, they don't have that ability. So you need to have hard conversations with your kids about what is actually doable for your family. Do not have that conversation when the kids at the second half of junior year. The conversation starts freshman year.
Right,
Hey,
but
honey,
why is there so much student debt? I'm going to get to Lisa's question in 1 second. Why is there so much student debt, and then why are we forgiving it?
oh,
Okay, we don't have to go
there's so
there.
much.
We
Well,
don't
I'm
have
going
to.
to
I
do
mean,
that quickly.
that's
There's
such a big issue, right? I didn't have student
okay,
debt either. I paid for my own tuition. I saved my money, but it was a reasonable payment. I could do
right.
it, right?
Okay, part of this has to do with the fact that in the culture in the last 30 years, the rate of increases for college
Yes,
tuition
yes,
far outpaced the rate of inflation. And even upper middle class people who used to be able to write the check for their kids could no longer afford it. And so we had this whole system, which is kind of a broken system still, of like anyone who wants a loan can get a loan. And it's like the only time we lend money without saying, well, what's your ability to repay it? Why
uh,
are we forgiving and so that's a weird thing. Now, why are we forgiving it? I don't know. I have mixed emotions. What I always thought when I am on the record on this, so I've been on TV saying this, I am not a huge fan of debt forgiveness. I am a huge fan of forgiveness if someone got swindled. If you were told you went to a for-profit school that did not give you a college degree that actually meant anything, and they put you on a loan scheme that is ridiculous, sure, get rid of it. Like it's Corinthian College or some nonsense like that, sure. For the vast majority of people, I think this debt forgiveness is not my favorite policy. I don't love it. And I don't know, I keep thinking, what if you're the person who paid your debt off in 2019? And now, like, 10 grand's real money. If they were going to do it for real, I would have lowered the thresholds. I think the thresholds are too high on the income. That's my other thing. But anyway,
there's a lot to unpack there. It's an ongoing, but let's go to Lisa's question because it's a really important one, which is how do you get the right people at the table to help with one's financial planning? What type of experts do you need? And here's the most important one, because Lisa, I have to just tell you, we've gone through several different people. How do you know if someone is good?
I wish I could see Lisa right now instead of her bright smiling face. I really want that video.
You know what? If she wants to come on, she certainly can do that, but that's up to her.
All right. I just anyway. Hi, Lisa. Okay. So people who give financial advice have different designations. Okay. So what I think is important is to understand what these designations mean. So if you want somebody who actually is trained to provide holistic financial advice, those people are usually called certified financial planners, CFPs. And a CFP has an obligation to make sure that your best interest comes first. And that is called a fiduciary responsibility to you. I like that designation. I happen to have it. So by the way, of course I like it. I like that designation because it is not someone who's just, I'm a money manager, because to some extent, I don't think money management's all that hard. I think that people are sort of like overcomplicated. In general, it's not that hard. But what is hard is to understand, like, hey, how much life insurance do I need? What type of insurance? Or what is hard to understand is I'm weighing two different jobs. I have a job here on one hand that has a pension, and this other job pays a lot more. And I kind of like torn. I don't know which one is better for me and my family long term. Or I don't really understand how much money I really can contribute to my kids' college education. So I think what happens for me is that if someone is doing real financial planning, that's worth it to me. So, but if someone is just saying, I'm managing your money, they better be showing me, like, I'm not sure that it pays to hire someone to manage money in this day and age, because I think you can get that and you could probably do it yourself. But even if you don't want to do it for yourself, you can have a lot of these investment platforms that will do it for you. And if you don't buck around with it too much, you'll probably stay out of trouble. 90% of active managers, people who are paid to beat the market, do not beat the market. 9-0. Okay. Of the 10% that do, it's kind of funny. The 10% is different every year. So even if Donna beat the market last year right? So maybe you beat the market last year. Next year, you're probably not going to. So what that tells me, can we just stop making ourselves crazy about the investing stuff? The real important issues to me, as Lisa points out, are who are the right people at the table? Someone to do hardcore financial planning, a great person who's going to especially if you have a complicated tax life, a really good tax preparer or CPA who knows what they're doing. A lot of people out there watching this are small business people. It is important to have a good tax professional on your side. Lisa!
Hey, Lisa, everybody, this is Charlotte. We're answering this question right now for her.
Awesome. Hey, Jill.
Okay.
Hi, honey. How are you? I'm so happy to see you.
Sorry, keep talking. Be smart. Go ahead.
So okay, CFP, a CPA, someone who's got a really good tax base in your, and really understands that, and a great estate attorney if you have a complicated situation. Those are like your three core. Now, if you have a big business like Donna, I don't know, do you have an attorney who's at the table for you? Do you have somebody who like makes sure that, you've got the right documents in place? Are you making sure that you have the right protections? Those are the kinds of people that you want at the table. This, of course, reminds me of one of my favorite stories as an investment advisor and financial planner. I actually had a client who hit the lottery. It was like the most incredible experience of my life. It was awesome. All right, don't play the lottery because it's a very bad odds. But here's what was so instructive about this for me. So this young couple, like not young, but let's say it's 40-ish couple, 40-year-old couple comes in. They've got 5 kids, young to us. They got 5 kids, and they come and they tell me their whole story. And they say, well, I do this and I do this, and this is how much money we have. This is how much money we have in our retirement account. And I said, okay, well, this is what I would think, and this is what I think you should do. And I said, you probably don't need me. Here's what I think you should do to kind of navigate this next chapter of your life. And the woman says, let me tell you, there's one other thing. And I'm going to tell you this. It's the last piece of information, because every other person we talked to, we made it the first piece of information, and we noticed that they didn't really pay attention to us. So I said, okay, what's that? I hit the lottery, the mass millions, for $80 million, and my after-tax lump sum check is $26 million.
Wow.
And I literally fell off my chair and said, get the F out of here. It was the most incredible thing. And she said, and the reason why we're telling you this last is that as soon as we mentioned that number, people treated us differently. And we didn't feel like people actually cared about us. They just cared about our money, but you actually showed that you cared about us in this whole conversation that led up to the money part. And then they said, so we're going to give you all the money. I'm like, you're not giving me all the money. Let's talk about the team we need to build. And we talked about who the people are, who were the professionals that needed to come, how were we going to help them out, what were the steps we were going to take. And I said, we're going to go really slowly. And they said, well, we really maybe we shouldn't put all of our money. I said, so fine, I'll find 2 other people you're going to put the money with, but we'll build the team like that. And it was a great relationship. But I learned a lot in that moment, because I think people do want to feel like they are valued as human beings beyond the value of their accounts. And that's the real issue when you're building your team.
Without a doubt. Lisa, I hope that's helpful. Bridget is with us from Ghana. Just so you know, we have an internationally global audience here. And I love this. She talks about her mom always being frugal. They didn't have a whole lot of money growing up where they were in Africa. But she always asked the question, is it a want or a need? And I love that. Like, that's a framing in terms of how to be sensible about money. And Daylin, and we have to give Daylin this opportunity before we wrap up with your 3 tips, Jill. Her parents are 75. They only have property as an asset. I'm glad they have that. Very little savings, Social Security, part-time job as income. As a daughter, and it's funny, my mom just came in. Hi, Mom. As a daughter, what should I help them do now? They have a will. That's interesting. Okay. The whole intergenerational thing is a whole thing. How to, how kids, the parents.
And I think what's great is that actually amid COVID, we've done a lot more intergenerational financial planning, and there's intergenerational living arrangements. So the first thing to figure out is, can my parents survive on their Social Security checks? Maybe they can. But if they can't, what other money do they have? They've got a little bit of savings. The question becomes, we want to stay in this home, right? If that's the where they're coming from, one thing to consider might be something called a reverse mortgage, which is an insanely complicated product. But it is like pulling money, the equity of your house out to live on. If that's, and that should be something that's in a conversation as a possibility. But what I would suggest is maybe you and your parents go see a certified financial planner, talk about their situation, have the conversation. It's like, remember how hard it was for them to have the sex conversation with you? Well, guess what? You're going to have the money conversation with them, and it's hard to have. But if you can have it, you can come up with a game plan. And that game plan may be that, hey, you know what? They're going to have to get a reverse mortgage. We're going to get money out of it. Or it may be that they're going to sell this place because it's not a house they want to stay in, and they're going to have some equity that comes out of that house, and they're going to rent for a while. But these are the kinds of conversations that you need to have intergenerationally. We just talked about having the intergenerational conversation of you and your college kids. You need to have these conversations with your aging parents for the exact same reason, to set expectations and for you to prepare for what you as a family can take on.
That's great, Howard. So we're just about out of time. We always ask all of our guests for 3 tips we want to leave everybody to ponder. These are Jill's.
This is me, and I call it my big three. And by the way, when I go on television every year for New Year's resolutions, this is what I always talk about. And it's really boring sometimes, but it's so smart because like boring can be beautiful. So what did we learn in the pandemic? People who had an emergency reserve fund were much better emotionally prepared to live through the dip and the return. And so what's an emergency reserve fund? It is 6 to 12 months of your living expenses. Embedded in that recommendation is that you have to know how much money you spend. So you must have a grip on how much money you spend every single month. An emergency reserve fund should be able to have like 6 to 12 months of living expenses. By the way, if the economy rolls over, if you lose your job, if your spouse loses hours, this is the fund on which you like have your little like, thank God I have it, or your refrigerator craps out. Okay. Then this is not the Ray Dalio have no debt. This is if you can, while you are building up your emergency reserve fund, you want to reduce credit card or high interest debt. When the student loan clock starts ticking again for everyone who has leftover loans after 10 grand is erased, that number is at 6%. That's much more than you are going to be earning in your savings account. So you want to reduce higher interest debt as much as you can. And then you want to try to fund retirement plans to the best of your ability, especially if you have a company match. And so when I think about these big three, I think that many people ask me, what comes first? The answer is yes. So if you have a company match, you put in you try to get that money because it's free money to you. But if at the same time you have $2,000 of credit card debt and only $1,000 in your emergency reserve fund, whatever money you can scour through your weekly and monthly budget to put towards these obligations and these goals, do it and automate it and don't leave it to chance. This to me is like the simplest bit of advice that I come back to, and it works every time. You don't have to be a great investor to deal with these big three.
No, it's awesome. And I have to say, this whole idea of funding retirement plans, and we had a little chat on this, is that people don't value the fact that companies step up and provide savings for you. You can't get people to save, but in a sense, companies are helping people save, but they're not valued. And I find that really fascinating and troubling at the same time.
Yeah. If anyone who's owned a small business, and I did own a small business, you struggle with this because you're like, I remember we used to pay for 100% of health insurance and no one cared. And I was like, oh my God, our premiums are going up every year. And then all of a sudden they cared when we said, we can't do it anymore. Then you care. So Here's the thing. The people who are really good savers will tell you, how did you have all this money? Well, you know what I did? I started when I was young. The company had a match that encouraged me to do it. Even if you don't have a match, to get in the habit of putting money away for yourself is incredibly helpful. If you're young and you're just starting out, you use the Roth version. If you are more in your, sort of mid or end of career, you may still want to do a Roth, but you want to do something and you get into the habit. Donna, we are both old athletes, right? And this big three is essentially layups and foul shots.
I love it. I love it. So they're free. We're in control of making that happen. Let me just ask you, we got to go, but we're going to be having Generation Wow on November 1st. We'll have 650 teen girls. We want to give a message to our teen girls, short and concise, which is the best way to deliver messages to our youngsters these days. What would you say to them?
If you are young, the best thing you can do when you think about your finances is be accountable. Don't blow it off. So pay attention to the money that you're spending, have conversations about money with your parents, and don't be afraid. This is all within your control.
That's awesome. So anyway, anybody who's in the Jacksonville area and wants to be walking side by side, each step with a young girl is a positive step in her future. November 1st, we're looking for volunteers and mentors. Please join us for Generation Wow. It is our 10th anniversary, 10 years over which we've probably touched nearly 20,000 girls' lives, and we are just getting started. In addition, we will be back with Refresh, If you haven't picked it up or downloaded your copy of Carolyn Buck-Luce's book called Epic, I've been recommending it everywhere. Jill, as soon as your book comes out, we'll be doing the same for yours. But honestly, really actionable, powerful insights into how we can be planning our lives. We become our life planners, and Carolyn Buck-Luce is so great. Also has been on our Generation W stage. Tangible, actionable insights. It's October 26th. We'll be back here at noon for Refresh. And listen, I know everyone will be thanking Jill Schlesinger for a long time to come if you've had a chance to be here now. If you find her on our website or our YouTube channel, which I'm sure that you will, or for all of our Facebook people, Jill Schlesinger, you're a Hall of Famer. You are just wonderful. And thank you so very much for contributing to our lives and our sense of learning together, building community, and actually feeling a bit better for it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.